So welcome to part 3 of this podcast. If you've only just tuning in, we've already discussed in part 1 Solar Zero and how the learnings from Solar Zero can come to the UK to help make solar and batteries more affordable. We've talked about in part 2 Andrew's personal journey through his renovation of his property and the sustainability targets he had in mind and the challenges around integrating a heat pump in. And in part 3, we're going to be talking about MyGrid GB, which is a Twitter account that Andrew runs. So just as for people at home and for my benefit, to be perfectly honest, what is MyGrid GB? What's it telling us?
Yeah, and by the way, I was totally unprepared for that. I thought because we've done about 3 takes every time of the intro. You did that in one. That's awesome. That was brilliant. Well done. I was like, I don't need to concentrate.
I get smoother towards the back end of it. Yeah,
very slick. So what's MyGrid? So I was doing a PhD at Durham Uni and in renewables, and everyone was like, flipping heck, Andrew, what's the point of this? That wind farm up the road from me, it's never spinning half the time. And why are you putting solar in the UK? It's dark, I was like, oh, bloody hell. And I was sat looking at all these numbers, like spreadsheet geek, all these numbers about what renewables were doing. And I thought, we've got to start telling this story. We've got to start communicating better about energy transition. And then I thought, actually, if I do that in the way I initially wanted to do it, it's going to have so much bias on, it's going to lose its credibility. So I didn't want to be going, wind's amazing, wind's going to change the world, look at renewables, aren't they wonderful? So what I decided to do was I set up a little bot, and every 4 hours at MyGrid GB, it tweets out where Britain's electricity is coming from. And so it gives, say, this moment, 40% from gas, 30% from wind, 10% for nuclear, whatever it says. And it tells you how much carbon we're producing and what that is relative to a 2030 target. And I thought, this is fine, put some data out, loads of energy geeks would be really happy. And it very quickly snowballed. So one of my early followers and engagers was Robert Llewellyn he does the Fully Charged show. Really, really.
And was Crichton as well on Red Dwarf.
It was Crichton and Red Dwarf. That's how I know him. Yeah. Also the one I wanted to be in Red Dwarf. You know what I mean? It was great. And he was just really great. Like he did a couple of retweets and it just spiraled. And now I can get like 1 million impressions a month on Twitter.
Really?
And because of the lack of bias, all I do is give statistics, and I've embellished it now with how much over the last 4 weeks, how much over the last year we got from different sources. Whenever we're free of coal, it tweets about when all the coal power stations are off. So some of those early headlines were people using MyGrid GB to get the data. And I never, just never tweeted with bias. And I think it gives it a real credibility. So people who follow me, you have the head of the sort of engagement person for the fracking industry follows and uses the tweets.
Really?
And at the same time, people from Greenpeace are using it. And so you get this really quite interesting dynamic on Twitter and a very broad spectrum of people using it and using the information for various things. And it's so nice. Sometimes you're like sat in a conference somewhere and someone's put a graph up from my website, or someone tweets me and says, oh, thanks, can I use this in my science lesson today?
That's fantastic.
Physics girl, I think she's called I think she's in the Lake District, but she always uses it in her geography, physics classes, which I think is just really nice.
And that's not, this isn't for, it's completely non-biased. It's not for commercial gain. Or anything. This is just shared. So, but what's it telling us? Let's say it's sharing this information about where the energy is coming from and the carbon impact of that energy.
Yeah.
But for our viewers and a homeowner that's sat there, what does that information mean when it comes to the price I pay for my energy? What does that information tell us?
Yeah, so it's done a couple of things. I think for a consumer, you plug in your TV into the wall, you turn your oven on. It's where's that electricity coming from? How are we making it? And when I started the journey, 30% of electricity was some coal power stations, and MyGrid GB followers have seen how that coal's now plateaued to, less than 1% of our, in fact, I think less than 0.5% of our electricity use. it's seen wind and solar become, bigger or the biggest providers of electricity in the country. It's seen gas, I think, over the last 4 weeks, less than 40% of our electricity is coming from fossil fuels. It's sort of shown that journey and that transition happening.
If I was a homeowner looking at that, it sounds to me like fossil fuels are going down.
Yep.
Which, carbon emissions are going down with them.
Yep.
So big
Great.
thumbs up.
Happy
Everything's
day,
going in the right way. So if I was a homeowner watching this, I'd be scratching my head going, well, why am I paying more now than I ever have done for my energy?
Yeah, it's quite funny. It was the early days were in fact, it's always been really good. And I've done a little bit of media work through MyGrid, and I've done lectures and things. And the thing I was always saying was, because I started blogging alongside to say what I was thinking, was turning off coal power stations isn't necessarily something we should celebrate. And the reason I was saying that was what Britain's been doing is an amazing job in growing wind turbines and solar and producing more energy locally, but we've also transitioned over to something that's very dependent on gas and only gas. And 3-4 years ago, most of our gas coming from Norway comes to and comes to a pipe across the North Sea, and people going, well, this is fine, Norway's stable, happy days. And I was like, well, yeah, that's fine, but what happens if that stops? What happens if there's a price shock? And I'm literally quoted saying, what happens if Putin's got his hand on the gas tap? The price of that gas will go up, and all our energy bills will go up as a result. We don't have that backup from the coal power stations.
And that's not that when we're talking about that, with the majority of homes in the UK, you're going to have maybe a dual fuel bill or whatever, but you're going to have an electricity supply, and then you're going to have gas maybe for your heating, hot water, cooking, what have you. But just so we're clear, that the price of gas and the price of electricity are intrinsically linked.
They're intrinsically linked.
And that's because in some cases, when we don't have enough renewable energy being generated, we have to burn gas to deliver electricity? Or
no, it's really interesting. So electricity isn't priced how you would think about it. It doesn't matter if you've got a green fuel tariff or not. Electricity is priced in one way. And I like we might have to do a bit of an analogy, a bit of a role play, if that's all right, to describe it. So you walk into Asda, your local supermarket. What's the first thing you buy?
Good question. Bread.
Bread. And how much is your loaf of bread?
I don't know. Is it £1.90?
£1.90.
I'll be honest, I don't do the shopping at all.
Okay, all right. Simon's gone in.
You asked me over the price of a pint, I can cover that.
We'll do that. Yeah, all right. Yeah. So you've gone into the supermarket, you bought a £2 loaf of bread. You've now gone down the booze aisle, and you're going to buy a nice bottle of wine. How much is your bottle of wine?
Again, unfortunately, that's not me. But let's say I'm in the Long Shot, which is a pub I like to go to in Liverpool, and it's happy hour, and I've paid £3.50 for a pint. Does that work?
It kind of works. I'd rather you stayed in Asda. But
okay.
Bottle of wine, £7. There we go.
Okay, he's a white man. Good.
So that was for the audience's benefit. That was the audience in the studio shouting out, trying to jump in and correct Simon. So Simon's gone in reluctantly into supermarkets, bought a £2 loaf of bread and a £7 bottle of wine. How much is your shop?
£9.
No. In electricity world, it'd be £14. Because in electricity world, you take whatever the most expensive thing was that was generating, and everybody gets that price.
Okay.
Mad, isn't it? So if right now, let's sake of argument, we're buying 20% of our power is coming from nuclear at £50 a megawatt hour. As I say, 20% nuclear. 60% of it's coming from renewables, and that's costing £60. And there's gas providing the rest at £200. All of electricity gets paid £200.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. And what that means is if the gas price shoots up and we've got no choice but other than to burn that gas, that sets the price for the rest of electricity.
But
now, there's a few nuances, and I'm sure people who know the industry, well, there's feed-in tariffs and subsidies and this and that fix the price. But fundamentally, the gas, the most expensive generator, drives up the price of pretty much everything else.
And we've seen that. I mean, the the energy crisis, as it was called, it was directly linked to the war in Ukraine, the impact
Correct.
of that. Now that is, as you say, not necessarily Putin sat there pulling the lever, but ultimately the impact of that war sent wholesale prices of gas
through the roof.
And that means that across the board, everybody's paying more for their energy, regardless of where it comes
Correct.
from.
Yeah,
Bar
that's right.
maybe oil, I think, kind of was isolated from it in a way.
But I think that the point is we were sat saying, it's okay, we're on Norwegian gas, it's stable, it's low price, happy days.
That's interesting, though, you say that.
Well, it is. And there's two reasons interesting. One, I always said, well, that's fine. But as long as, if everyone else starts running short in Europe, they're going to start buying Norwegian gas, and the Norwegians are going to put the price up.
Yeah.
The second thing I found out of a geologist friend of mine, a professor at Durham Uni, is that the gas pipe for Norway sits under a subsea cliff that could collapse at any point and take some of that out. Now, I don't know if that's him exaggerating, but the point is, it's a single source of supply, and if we lost that, we're in trouble. And what MyGrid GB says to me, and what I've written my book about, and what I've podcasted about, is you need a variety of energy sources to keep prices low. Countries with diverse energy mixes have lower prices and more stable prices, and are more able to take shocks.
It's incredible, though, that we've managed, as a civilized society, to end up in this position. Because you take Norway as an example, they have spent a significant amount of time and effort and investment decarbonizing their homes, so they are significantly less reliant on gas, even though they can produce and distribute their own gas. So they shifted away from it, knowing that in the time where something like this would happen, they would be isolated from that impact.
Correct.
Whereas it does feel a little bit like in the UK, like we've had a kind of, I don't know, it might sound bad, but a kind of drug dealer's approach to gas.
We are absolutely hooked on the stuff. But this energy crisis, the bang on it about Putin's fault, war in Ukraine, it's total policy failure in my view. Something we need to learn from, maybe is a better way of saying it. Countries around the world, look at the Middle East, Dubai, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait. They're selling all around the world and they're investing it in their economies. Australia is selling minerals, coal, and investing it in their economy. Norway set up a sovereign wealth fund. They sold the oil and gas abroad and invested that money back into Norway. What we did, we went, oh, North Sea gas, great, happy days, pump it in every house, 90% of our houses running on gas, and we're just burning the stuff. It's like, you might as well just take all our wealth and burn it to keep warm.
It's literally, it's as simple as that.
It's as stupid as putting it like that. That scene in Narcos where Escobar burns $1 million to keep his family warm. It's not far off what we've done.
But that, you would say, all these other economies. Why? I visited Norway not so long ago, and actually, when you talk to some of the Norwegians, some of the things that were done, you say setting up the sovereign wealth fund, it was seen at the time as a very, very, very negative thing, because what the Norwegians wanted in the instant was, let's use that to take our bills down. The government stood strong. They put this policy in place so that the benefit at that time directly didn't impact they took
a long-term view.
Exactly, because those same people that I'm sure at that time were complaining about, why are we doing this when we could be directing that to our homes and I'd be getting lower fuel bills, and now protected against what we're all going through. But if we have been, if we're not going to say duped, but the conversation around the cost of gas was never something that was widely discussed until we had the war in Ukraine, until we had the energy crisis. And that was because, and as I say, this kind of does feel like a drug dealer's approach to it. Here's some cheap gas. You don't need to worry about gas. Here's some cheap gas.
I think it's been known for a long time. I mean, I was in school, 25 years ago, learning that the North Sea gas will run out. And I think what I've learned from this, and I think what we need to learn as a country, is if you've got a finite resource, you need to invest that resource into getting off it, you need to think about sustainability. Sustainability is affordable energy forever. It's clean energy forever. Sustainability is not plastic packaging that you can only use once. It's reusable and recyclable and materials, for example. And I think that sustainability mantra is actually really, really important. And I hope that we're not, we're very good at looking at single issues. Like, for example, it's Putin's fault with the gas. It's a gas problem, when actually there's a lot of things going on at the moment that we need to be addressing. Yeah. On the gas front, a simple thing that we could do is decouple the price of electricity from gas, for example. So I did some analysis that just over 3 months this winter, if we decoupled our gas price from electricity price, it would have saved 3 billion off energy bills across the UK. 3 billion. 3 billion, one policy change, 3 billion.
But you know for a fact that the politician who will stand up and make that change has to be of the opinion that this is great for the country, this is great for the environment, and this will benefit the people in the future. But when they first make that change, it's going to have an impact on people's pocket.
I think it's a policy. It's hard to argue it's immediately good for the environment. It's hard to argue that it's immediately it's hard to know intuitively that's the right thing to do. And this is where long-term thinking is important. Like, as a very reactive policy, it was absolutely the right thing to do. You could put more money in people's pockets than you could take in VAT. Whatever Liz Truss's levy was, she had this levy thing. It did more than that. But I think practically it's moving our energy policy from something that's very reactive to something that's very future thinking and sustainable. A bit like what Norway's done, and that's kind of, I think, like my motivation in the industry is, and what I'm learning from MyGrid is about how do we transition, and it's an orderly transition. How do we transition in an orderly manner off of fossil fuels, which are fundamentally the problem, and as they get less and less, and we're using up more and more of that finite resource, we're going to end up with more of a problem. So it's about getting away from that.
And we do have these finite. We do have renewable resources. We have an extremely windy country. We are an island. We have access to hydro. We can generate solar.
Yeah.
And hydro power. Yeah, not necessarily. Hydro power, solar power, wind power.
We've got an amazing wind resource. We've got a reasonable solar resource that can fill in some of the gaps. We have got we did have a pretty advanced nuclear industry. Very short-term thinking in the 80s killed that off, not killed it off, but did a lot of damage to that. Took a lot of the skills away from the UK. We've got a very innovative and a very creative country. We've got amazing progress coming on in energy storage technologies, not just batteries, but heat. I mean, I've said for years, I think Sunamp, which is a heat storage company, is one of the most leading companies in the world in how they're thinking about storing heat energy. And I said that before any relationship with yourself. I was so impressed by it. And I think if we set the mission, and you think about the objective has got to be, to me, and it is, wean off fossil fuels in an orderly manner and as quick as you can do it.
I think that journey that we've got to go on.
Well, we're on it. Yeah, it's not we've got to go on. We're on it. Yeah, but we're already on it.
It's absolutely got to happen. And the truth of the matter is, it's going to be painful, because you actually it's the equivalent of probably weaning a baby off sucking their thumb.
Why is it painful?
I think right now there will be a lot of people that are experiencing extreme financial hardship at the current energy bills. And we know there is people out there that are making a choice of either heating or eating. And this winter is going to be a painful winter for people. And that's the pain I'm talking about. Now, if we talk about that the ability for somebody in fuel poverty to make a conscious transition away from gas, bear in mind that it's probably now equally as painful as going to an alternative resource. You've got to find the capital to make that switch to an alternative source that is going to have a direct impact on your income.
Yeah. So like, how does someone choosing between heating or eating is the classic case afford renewable technology? And it's absolutely how you got to think about it, because to get to net zero, we need everyone to be able to access low carbon tech, and as a society, we've got to reduce energy bills because there's too many people losing out and suffering. So when you say, I do disagree with you. I don't think the journey needs to be painful. I think it's the opposite. I think it should be about improving people's lives. And I think it can be about improving people's lives. And that's not just because, as I think, the planet can't cope with what we're doing. I think it's because the new technologies that are coming in can actually, as you say, heat people's homes up for less money.
Yeah, there was a wider benefit, isn't there? You know yourself, there was money that was being spent optimizing the grid and making sure it stays, the frequencies stay as they need to be. If we were to redirect some of that capital and into making homes, make that transition, and make a clear business case from a financial perspective for the customer, make a clear business case from a financier and a lender's perspective to support that transition into the home. This is what you're doing in New Zealand, where you're helping people make this transition off fossil fuels into solar, into battery, in a very compelling way that is not costing them more than what they're currently paying now.
Yeah, and it stabilizes the bill as well. I mean, I think it'd be hard pressed to find someone who thinks that gas prices or wholesale energy prices will, over the long run, decrease. They should fall a bit after this mini crisis we're in. But I guarantee in the next 30 years there'll be another fossil fuel crisis, probably 2 of them.
Well, this is it. We've got to do as others have done in the past. We've got to use our clean energy resources, wind, solar, hydro, to reduce our reliance on gas, so that we are just as the others have done before. We are in far greater control of the assets that generate our energy. Yeah. But it does feel like there needs to be some state-owned assets within this mix, where at the moment it seems to be everything is contracted out to other people to build resources for us. Where is our kind of UK government-owned assets that enable us to say, "We'll tell you what, we're gonna take a hit on that"?
I don't know. I worked in development of solar and wind and batteries, and competition's been really effective at driving the costs down.
That's true.
It's been really effective at deploying rapidly. It's been really effective at finding solutions to put in that help communities, etc. And I think to try and competition can be really effective, and use it in the right place. And where you kind of want competition is on the generation, building power stations. Where I don't think we need necessarily the competition is on, and where we don't have competition is on the power grid. So the power grid in the UK, there's one of them. There's one cable goes into your house that gives you power. And in a lot of countries in the world, including New Zealand, those networks are owned by you. They're all owned by the consumer. They're a community asset. They're not paying a shareholder somewhere off on the other side of the world. They're owned to the community. And I think that's something where we can start to look at. It's a natural monopoly. It's not something where competition necessarily helps you. And something where you have that regulated monopoly. I think community ownership just reminds the heads of those companies that there's a community to serve. And I was sat with the head of on a Zoom call with the CEO of one of the biggest lines companies in New Zealand, like about 2 months ago. He's a good friend of mine, and he says, it absolutely, he's kept saying, "Andrew, it's about my community. Andrew, it's about my community. If I make more than, I think it's the 6% he has to make, the money goes back to my community." And that's, I think, where we can be a bit more smarter about government ownership. I'm not really bought into this GB supplier company that I think Labour want to do, or GB Energy. I don't think it's taking away competition from where you need it, and that the focus to me should be on the sort of more regulated monopolies.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. How long have we been talking? 20, 25 minutes? I suspect we could do about 4 podcasts where you and I just chat about the energy transition. It's so interesting.
It's in some cases it can be literally, it's that granular level of somebody on a prepayment meter and saying, well, I can't afford to put that in because I've got to go and do the food shop today. Right up to as you say, the network operators who manage the cables into your home and maybe processes within those organizations that are, right now I've seen a notification come through today, getting approval to connect solar to the grid is taking longer than it's ever done before.
It is a utility scale project. Yeah,
it's domestic scale.
Really,
actually, there's a blockage at the moment in processing domestic G89, I think it is, applications to connect to the grid.
There's, if you think there's, how many we're doing? What is it? 1,500 homes a month at the moment are getting solar. It's a big number. It's a lot for a DNO to cope with.
A very manual process, which is physically checking each one, and when we know their systems don't necessarily have that data. But it's been incredibly interesting. You're going to be coming over to Liverpool more often to see us. Yeah, so definitely have you back on again. So thank you very much.
Thanks
for your
Simon.
time, and thank you very much for everybody for watching. As I say, you can register for the Heatio Energy Challenge Group by visiting heatio.co.uk/energy challenge group, and follow us on our social media channels. Thank you for watching.